The True Believer, Thoughts on the Nature of Mass Movements by Eric Hoffer. Section 88. Whence comes the impulse to proselytize? Intensity of conviction is not the main factor which impels a movement to spread its faith to the four corners of the earth. Religions of great intensity often confine themselves to condemning, destroying, or at best pitying what is not themselves. Nor is the impulse to proselytize an expression of an overabundance of power, which, as Bacon has it, is like a great flood that will be sure to overflow. The missionary zeal seems rather an expression of some deep misgiving, some pressing feeling of insufficiency at the center. Proselytizing is more a passionate search for something not yet found than a desire to bestow upon the world something we already have. It is a search for a final and irrefutable demonstration that our absolute truth is indeed the one and only truth. The proselytizing fanatic strengthens his own faith by converting others. The creed whose legitimacy is most easily challenged is likely to develop the strongest proselytizing impulse. It is doubtful whether a movement which does not profess some preposterous and patently irrational dogma can be possessed of that zealous drive which must either win men or destroy the world. It is also plausible that those movements with the greatest inner contradiction between profession and practice, that is to say, with a strong feeling of guilt, are likely to be the most fervent in imposing their faith on others. The more unworkable communism proves in Russia, and the more its leaders are compelled to compromise and adulterate the original creed, the more brazen and arrogant will be their attack on a non-believing world. The slaveholders of the South became the more aggressive in spreading their way of life, the more it became patent that their position was untenable in a modern world. If free enterprise becomes a proselytizing holy cause, it will be a sign that its workability and advantages have ceased to be self-evident. The passion for proselytizing and the passion for world dominion are both perhaps symptoms of some serious deficiency at the center. It is probably as true of a band of apostles or conquistadors as it is of a band of fugitives setting out for a distant land that they escape from an untenable situation at home. And how often indeed do the three meet, mingle, and exchange their parts? Leadership, Section 89. No matter how vital we think the role of leadership in the rise of a mass movement, there is no doubt that the leader cannot create the conditions which make the rise of a movement possible. He cannot conjure a movement out of the void. There has to be an eagerness to follow and obey, and an intense dissatisfaction with things as they are, before movement and leader can make their appearance. When conditions are not ripe, the potential leader, no matter how gifted, and his holy cause, no matter how potent, remain without a following. The First World War and its aftermath readied the ground for the rise of the Bolshevik, fascist, and Nazi movements. Had the war been averted or postponed a decade or two, the fate of Lenin, Mussolini, and Hitler would not have been different from that of the brilliant plotters and agitators of the 19th century, who never succeeded in ripening the frequent disorders and crises of their time into full-scale mass movements. Something was lacking. The European masses, up to the cataclysmic events of the First World War, had not utterly despaired of the present and were therefore not willing to sacrifice it for a new life and a new world. Even the nationalist leaders who fared better than the revolutionists did not succeed in making of nationalism the popular holy cause it has become since. Militant nationalism and militant revolutionism seem to be contemporaneous. In Britain, too, the leader had to wait for the times to ripen before he could play his role. During the 1930s, the potential leader, Churchill, was prominent in the eyes of the people, and made himself heard day in, day out, but the will to follow was not there. It was only when disaster shook the country to its foundation and made autonomous individual lives untenable and meaningless that the leader came into his own. There is a period of waiting in the wings, often a very long period, for all the great leaders whose entrance on the scene seems to us a crucial point in the course of a mass movement. Accidents and the activities of other men have to set the stage for them before they can enter and start their performance. The commanding man, in a momentous day, seems only to be the last accident in a series. Section 90. Once the stage is set, the presence of an outstanding leader is indispensable. Without him, there will be no movement. The ripeness of the times does not automatically produce a mass movement, nor can elections, laws, and administrative bureaus hatch one. It was Lenin who forced the flow of events into the channels of the Bolshevik Revolution. Had he died in Switzerland, or on his way to Russia in 1917, it is almost certain that the other prominent Bolsheviks would have joined a coalition government. The result might have been a more or less liberal republic run chiefly by the bourgeoisie. In the case of Mussolini and Hitler, the evidence is even more decisive. Without them, there would have been neither a fascist nor a Nazi movement. Events in England at this moment also demonstrate the indispensability of a gifted leader for the crystallization of a mass movement. A genuine leader, a socialist Churchill, at the head of the Labour government, would have initiated the drastic reforms of nationalization in the fervent atmosphere of a mass movement and not in the undramatic drabness of socialist austerity. He would have cast the British worker in the role of a heroic producer and in that of a pioneer in truly scientific industrialism. He would have made the British feel that their chief task is to show the whole world, and America, and Russia in particular, what a truly civilized nation can do with modern methods of production, when free alike from the confusion, waste, and greed of capitalist management, and from the Byzantinism, barbarism, and ignorance of a Bolshevik bureaucracy. He would have known how to infuse the British people with the same pride and hope which sustained them in the darkest hours of the war. It needs the iron will, daring, and vision of an exceptional leader to concert and mobilize existing attitudes and impulses into the collective drive of a mass movement. The leader personifies the certitude of the creed and the defiance and grandeur of power. He articulates and justifies the resentment dammed up in the souls of the frustrated. He kindles the vision of a breathtaking future so as to justify the sacrifice of a transitory present. He stages the world of make-believe so indispensable for the realization of self-sacrifice and united action. He evokes the enthusiasm of communion, the sense of liberation from a petty and meaningless individual existence. What are the talents requisite for such a performance? Exceptional intelligence, noble character, and originality seem neither indispensable nor perhaps desirable. The main requirements seem to be audacity and a joy in defiance, an iron will, a fanatical conviction that he is in possession of the one and only truth, faith in his destiny and luck, a capacity for passionate hatred, contempt for the present, a cunning estimate of human nature, a delight in symbols, spectacles, and ceremonials, unbounded brazenness which finds expression in a disregard of consistency and fairness, a recognition that the innermost craving of a following is for communion, and that there can never be too much of it, a capacity for winning and holding the utmost loyalty of a group of able lieutenants. This last faculty is one of the most essential and elusive. The uncanny powers of a leader manifest themselves not so much in the hold he has on the masses, as in his ability to dominate and almost bewitch a small group of able men. These men must be fearless, proud, intelligent, and capable of organizing and running large-scale undertakings, and yet they must submit wholly to the will of the leader, draw their inspiration and driving force from him, and glory in this submission. Not all the qualities enumerated above are equally essential. The most decisive for the effectiveness of a mass movement leader seem to be audacity, fanatical faith in a holy cause, an awareness of the importance of a close-knit collectivity, and above all, the ability to evoke fervent devotion in a group of able lieutenants. Trotsky's failure as a leader came from his neglect, or more probably his inability, to create a machine of able and loyal lieutenants. He did not attract personal sympathies, or if he did, he could not keep them. An additional shortcoming was his ineradicable respect for the individual, particularly the creative individual. He was not convinced of a sinfulness and ineffectuality of an autonomous individual existence, and did not grasp the overwhelming importance of communion to a mass movement. Sun Yat-sen attracted himself an extraordinary number of able and devoted followers, firing their imaginations with his visions of the new China and compelling loyalty and self-sacrifice. Unlike him, Chiang Kai-shek seems to lack every essential quality of a mass movement leader. On the other hand, de Gaulle is certainly a man to watch. The leaders of communist parties outside Russia, by their subservience to Stalin and the Politburo, cannot attain the status of genuine leaders. They remain able lieutenants. For communism to become at present an effective mass movement in any Western country, one of two opposites has to happen. Either the personality of Stalin is made so tangible and immediate that it can act as a catalyst, or the local Communist Party has to cut loose from Russia and, after the manner of Tito, flaunt its defiance against both capitalism and Stalinism. Had Lenin been the emissary of a leader and a Politburo sitting in some distant foreign land, it is doubtful whether he could have exercised his fateful influence on the course of events in Russia. 91. The crude ideas advanced by many of the successful mass movement leaders of our time incline one to assume that a certain coarseness and immaturity of mind is an asset to leadership. However, it was not the intellectual crudity of an Ami McPherson or a Hitler which won and held their following, but the boundless self-confidence which prompted these leaders to give full rein to their preposterous ideas. The quality of ideas seems to play a minor role in mass movement leadership. What counts is the arrogant gesture, the complete disregard of the opinion of others, the single-handed defiance of the world. Charlatanism of some degree is indispensable to effective leadership. There can be no mass movement without some deliberate misrepresentation of facts. No solid, tangible advantage can hold a following and make it zealous and loyal unto death. The leader has to be practical and a realist, yet must talk the language of the visionary and the idealist. Originality is not a prerequisite of great mass movement leadership. One of the most striking traits of the successful mass movement leader is his readiness to imitate both friend and foe, both past and contemporary models. The daring which is essential to this type of leadership consists as much in the daring to imitate as in the daring to defy the world. Perhaps the clue to any heroic career is an unbounded capacity for imitation, a single-minded fashioning after a model. This excessive capacity for imitation indicates that the hero is without a fully developed and realized self. There is much in him that is rudimentary and suppressed. His strength lies in his blind spots and in plugging all outlets but one. 92. The total surrender of a distinct self is a prerequisite for the attainment of both unity and self-sacrifice. And there is probably no more direct way of realizing this surrender than by inculcating and extolling the habit of blind obedience. When Stalin forces scientists, writers, and artists to crawl on their bellies and deny their individual intelligence, sense of beauty, and moral sense, he is not indulging a sadistic impulse, but is solemnizing, in a most impressive way, the supreme virtue of blind obedience. All mass movements rank obedience with the highest virtues and put it on a level with faith. Union of minds requires not only a perfect accord in the one faith, but complete submission and obedience of will to the Church and the Roman Pontiff as to God himself. Obedience is not only the first law of God, but also the first tenet of a revolutionary party and of fervent nationalism. Not to reason why is considered by all mass movements the mark of a strong and generous spirit. The disorder, bloodshed, and destruction which mark the trail of a rising mass movement lead us to think of the followers of the movement as being by nature rowdy and lawless. Actually, mass ferocity is not always the sum of individual lawlessness. Personal truculence militates against united action. It moves the individual to strike out for himself. It produces the pioneer, adventurer, and bandit. The true believer, no matter how rowdy and violent his acts, is basically an obedient and submissive person. The Christian converts who staged razzias against the University of Alexandria and lynched professors suspected of unorthodoxy were submissive members of a compact church. The communist rioter is a servile member of a party. Both the Japanese and Nazi rowdies were the most disciplined people the world has seen. In this country, the American employer often finds in the racial fanatic of our South, so given to mass violence, a respectful and docile factory hand. The Army, too, finds him particularly amenable to discipline. 93. People whose lives are barren and insecure seem to show a greater willingness to obey than people who are self-sufficient and self-confident. To the frustrated, freedom from responsibility is more attractive than freedom from restraint. They are eager to barter their independence for relief from the burdens of willing, deciding, and being responsible for inevitable failure. They willingly abdicate the directing of their lives to those who want to plan, command, and shoulder all responsibility. Moreover, submission by all to a supreme leader is an approach to their ideal of equality. In time of crisis, during floods, earthquakes, epidemics, depressions, and wars, separate individual effort is of no avail, and people of every condition are ready to obey and follow a leader. To obey is then the only firm point in a chaotic day-by-day existence. 94. The frustrated are also likely to be the most steadfast followers. It is remarkable that in a cooperative effort, the least self-reliant are the least likely to be discouraged by defeat. For they join others in a common undertaking not so much to ensure the success of a cherished project as to avoid an individual shouldering of blame in case of failure. When the common undertaking fails, they are still spared the one thing they fear most, namely, the showing up of their individual shortcomings. Their faith remains unimpaired, and they are eager to follow in a new attempt. The frustrated follow a leader less because of their faith that he is leading them to a promised land than because of their immediate feeling that he is leading them away from their unwanted selves. Surrender to a leader is not a means to an end, but a fulfillment. Whither they are led is of secondary importance. 95. There is probably a crucial difference between a mass movement leader and a leader in a free society. In a more or less free society, the leader can retain his hold on the people only when he has blind faith in their wisdom and goodness. A A second-rate leader possessed of this faith will outlast a first-rate leader who is without it. This means that in a free society, the leader follows the people even as he leads them. He must, as someone said, find out where the people are going so that he may lead them. When the leader in a free society becomes contemptuous of the people, he sooner or later proceeds on the false and fatal theory that all men are fools, and eventually blunders into defeat. Things are different where the leader can employ ruthless coercion, where, as in an active mass movement, the leader can exact blind obedience. He can operate on the sound theory that all men are cowards, treat them accordingly, and get results. One of the reasons that communist leaders are losing out in our unions is that by following the line and adopting the tactics of the party, they are assuming the attitude and using the tactics of a mass movement leader in an organization made up of free men.